Hi, my name is Faith.
And my name's Annabelle.
And as we are nearing the beginning of the Isaiah 62 fast, our hearts are excited to hear how multitudes across the nations and across the ages are jumping on board onto this very call that God has for this hour. This is definitely an unprecedented move of God, and it is prophetic for us to be part of this. And we want to invite you to join in, to participate in what God is orchestrating even in this generation. So in this video, we want to take some time to share why this fast is so significant to our time, because we are truly born for such a time as this. And this is a story that began 40 years ago, before I was born, before Annabelle was born, and before many of you watching this video were born. And 40 years represent the actualization or the entering into God's promises, just as we see in the transition from Moses' generation to Joshua generation, where he led the Israelites into the promised land. So more than just being part of this 21-day fast, God is inviting us to be part of his grand storyline even for this generation. So in this video, we want to highlight some significant events and some significant dates that point to this moment that we are in. On hindsight, we see how these dates and events were truly sovereignly orchestrated by God.
So the fast this year is going to start on the 7th of May 2023. And why is this date 7th May so significant? Well, it's because this year's fast is actually the fruit of a similar fast that took place 40 years ago, from 7th to 28th of May 1983. That fast actually set God's story in motion because that fast was divinely and unquestionably called by the Lord. In fact, there were two significant supernatural events which confirmed it. First was an unpredicted comet in the sky, and the second was a visitation by Angel Gabriel. So God actually spoke to Mike Bickle back in 1983 to call a 21-day fast starting 7th May 1983, and the Lord actually gave him Daniel 9 and 10 as the scriptures for the fast. After that, Angel Gabriel actually visited a prophet named Bob Jones and just told Bob Jones, give the man Daniel 9 and he will understand. So through that, there was a confirmation that the fast was to be called. And then last but not least, Bob Jones also prophesied that this fast would be confirmed by a comet that would be unpredicted by scientists that would come exactly on 7th May 1983. And lo and behold, it actually did happen. So more details can actually be found on the IHOP Kansas City website, and feel free to go and check it out if you so desire. However, this story is not just for the House of Prayer movement actually, because unbeknownst to Mike Bickle back then, or even Bob Jones, the Lord had actually spoken 7th May to another minister named Howard Pittman, and for him, the Lord gave him a message regarding our very generation. So Howard Pittman's story actually adds another aspect to what the Lord was birthing forth through that 21-day fast in 1983, and we'll be sharing it later in an upcoming video. So what was the fast about? If you read Daniel 9 and 10, Daniel 9 and 10 is actually about the time frame of the end of the age and also about Israel. And at that time, when they did the 21-day fast in 1983, they were primarily focusing on revival and at a local scale. However, God actually had bigger plans. He was actually birthing forth something on a global scale and even for the nation of Israel.
So this brings us back to 7 March 1983, where Bob Jones spoke to Mike Bickle on 3 things regarding his ministry. Mike Bickle was going to lead a youth movement of singers and musicians, which pointed to that 24/7 worship and prayer that will be used in power evangelism. Secondly, it would mobilize prayer for Israel. God would raise up spiritual intercessors in this youth movement, and this ministry would be deeply connected to many in Asia. And Bob Jones spoke even about this connection via unplugged TV sets in the rice paddy fields. Specifically, there would be 5,000 full-time intercessors placed on Harry S. Truman's property as a prophetic sign. So we need to understand that Harry S. Truman was raised up by God as a political intercessor because he was crucial in the establishment of Israel as a state in 1948. And in that same vein, in this generation, God is going to raise up spiritual intercessors who will take our stand on the Isaiah 62 wall to cry out for the purposes and the fullness of God in this generation. And throughout Asia, people would see this on unplugged TV sets in their hands, and we know them to be smartphones, as well as wristwatches, which are our smartwatches today. Back in 1983, there was really no concept of this. Who would have thought that TVs could be placed in rice paddy fields? So lo and behold, 40 years later, there was a down payment of the fulfillment of this word. And we want to highlight a significant event that happened last year on 14 May 2022, which was the Sand Gathering at Arrowhead Stadium. So prior to the Sand Gathering, there were actually more than 5,000 who gathered on the Truman property. Tents were being set up for non-stop prayer and worship, and there was a tent that was specifically set apart for worship and prayer surrounding God's heart and God's purposes for the nation of Israel. This was unprecedented, and it was also broadcast live on YouTube, where many in Asia, we were able to be connected to this on our unplugged TV sets on our wristwatches.
Yeah, and because we wanted to be a part of really this prophetic moment in history, we actually in our house gathered together to watch the prayer and intercession going on for Israel. And even though we aren't exactly in rice paddy fields in Singapore, but still we are part of that generation of people in Asia who be so deeply connected even to this movement. So 40 years ago, there were a few hundred who gathered in a local upper room to contend. And today, 40 years later, we see God orchestrating a global upper room where more than 1 million intercessors are going to come together to contend even for the very things on His heart, specifically for the nation of Israel and her destiny. This is really that fulfillment of what the fast 40 years ago was about anyway, from Daniel 9 to 10. So as Faith mentioned that, 40 years ago, the Lord spoke that this would be deeply connected with believers in Asia and actually especially China. So even during this time, we are praying that God would mark and place His zeal for Israel on many hearts in Asia, and that many of us, especially those even in the Chinese church, would begin to stand on the walls of Jerusalem and give God no rest until she's made that praise on the earth. So we have to see that this is not an initiative by men, but it's really an initiative by the Lord that was set in motion even 40 years ago. And we are in that time of acceleration and that time of fulfillment of God's plan even for the end of the age.
So we encourage you to join this 21-day fast because it's really a sovereign moment that God has appointed for us. And we exhort you, wherever you're at, in terms of your understanding of Israel, we want to encourage you to press in even for that greater zeal and that greater understanding, because there really is a grace that God is giving to us, especially to understand His heart. Just as how He gave Daniel skill to understand, He's going to give us skill to understand, and He's also going to share with us His very burdens and His very zeal for Israel. And this is God's sovereign appointed time for us to arise, just as Paul said in Romans 12, that we will be so abandoned to God and offer our lives up even as that living sacrifice. So we pray that God will speak to your heart and that He will ambush your heart even with His. God bless you.